I should probably turn my newspaper. You've seen my newspaper article, right? The one that's beside the
Yeah.
Apollo 11 there. Yeah.
Yep. We've already
Probably
got
turn that around for the time being, right?
yeah, absolutely. We already have 5 people that joined.
Oh, cool.
We got 10 people that joined. Brian, we've got people joining already.
Perfect. Welcome. Just 10 o'clock. We're going to give it a few minutes for people to join before we formally kick this off. Oh, but I see people are already seeing the poll and they're already participating in that. That's wonderful. So um, we'll do formal introductions, but those of you who've seen me moderate before, I always ask questions to get to know the audience, to get to understand where people are, so that we make the conversation as relative as possible. Stephen is in Boston, as you might have been able to figure out with the background of Fenway Park there.
Please, no
I'm
comments
in
about how bad
Toronto.
the Red Sox are, please, because they're terrible this
Yeah.
year already. So
Jays are doing okay. They swept the first series, but they struggled in the second one, which they should not have. So, yeah, we'll see.
I'm already finding the poll interesting. We've got people that have AI agents in production, but 100% do not have machine learning. So they skipped over machine learning, went right to agents. Very interesting.
That's interesting. Okay. It is interesting. Uh, we got 4 respondents so far. 5. Nice. 6. Lovely. 10:01. 10:02. Okay. Um, my name is Brian McConnell. I'm a partner here at Ortecha. I lead our operations in Canada, and I'm based in Toronto. Stephen, you want to just do a quick intro?
Sure. Hi, Stephen Gatchell, based in Boston, Massachusetts, partner and head of AI strategy on a global basis. Joined Ortecha about 3 months ago now, or almost 4 months ago. Great to be here today, Brian.
Yeah, great to have you, Stephen. So, Stephen, just before we came on, Stephen and I were talking about the Artemis launch. We're both from that generation where we're very excited about, as you can probably, oh, wrong way, as you can probably see, I have the Apollo 11 back there, and there's actually an article just to my left of that. I think it's your left as well. It's actually the front page of a Toronto newspaper that says "Man walks on the moon." So, kind of a little bit of a space buff, if you like. But and if you haven't seen a space launch, like if you haven't gone down to Cape Canaveral, that's a great experience, especially if you got kids. So, all right, we've got 10 respondents so far. Um, and we've got how many people we got in here now?
We're about 18. So there's 20 with you and me.
Yeah, I got 23. Okay. We'll leave it open for a little bit more, but let's walk through this. So, interesting. I was moderating a bunch of panels at a AI and data conference in Toronto last week, and I asked the same question here about AI. How many people have AI agents in production? I would say it was it was the last one of the last panels of the day in a stream of AI, and I would say maybe very low number of people answered yes. I would say maybe less than 10% said they had AI in production. A few more had machine learning in production. So this is interesting. We're getting the majority of the audience so far, 11 respondents so far saying they do have AI in production. So that'll be interesting. Of course, not everybody, but most people are working on getting it in production. Machine learning's balanced out a little bit. So, okay, so that says that people that are not doing AI. There could be some of them doing machine learning as well. And good. Six of the 10 that have responded so far say they do have an AI strategy. And those who have not, or those who don't, all of them say, sorry, 7 out of the 9 that responded to that question say yes, or it's not started, but two say that they don't need one. So that's interesting. So I'd like to do one more question, and I'd like to just, if you could pop your answers. Oh, sorry, let me do some housekeeping. Sorry, housekeeping stuff. So the best view to see Stephen and I is gallery. So if you're not on gallery view and you want to see both Stephen and I, that's the best view to have. We do have two functions, and I know this is always confusing, but we have a QA area and we have a chat area. And I think you guys probably understand the difference. You've probably been to enough of these, but QA in the questions in the Q&A, comments in the chat. We'll monitor both. Louise is on the line with us. She'll help monitor that and keep us informed of things that are in there. We will respond to questions in the chats or in the Q&A if it makes sense. We would like this to be interactive as much as we can be. So that would be great if you could throw your questions in the chat. And the session is being recorded. And the recording, we're hoping it's going to be out to you later today. Louise is in London, though, so it's getting near the end of the day for her, and may not get it out today, but we will do our best to do that. At the end of the session today, you will be getting an email from us, just questioning, how did you think it went, etc., and so that you have our contact information as well. So let's dive in. So if you're in the chat, if you could just tell me a little bit about what you think. If you jump into the chat, what do you think is holding us back on AI? Like, what are the challenges that are preventing us from getting AI into production? Because there's a bunch of you that don't have AI in production. I'm going to end the poll now. So there's a bunch of you that don't have AI in production. And I better open the chat here. There we go. So just pop your answers in the chat about what do you think are the challenges or blockers that are keeping us from getting AI into production. Give that just a minute, and then I'm going to ask Stephen the same question.
So you don't want
Governance,
me to answer
guardrails.
so people can't cheat, right, Brian?
Pardon me?
You don't want me to answer the question now so people can't cheat and just steal my answer.
Yeah,
So it's
exactly. Just parrot Steve's answer.
like a proper governance and guardrails. Yeah, we see that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the questions I asked again when I was doing a live panel, fragmented silo data across it. Yes, exactly. One of the kind of questions I asked, as I was doing a live webinar was, the same kind of question, and we dove into a little bit of, what is good AI governance look like? And one of the analogies or one of the stories I like to tell is from my friend Ben Clinch, who's also a partner in the UK. And he tells a story or asks a question like, why do we have brakes on cars? I mean, the simple answer is, of course, we have brakes on cars so we can stop. The more nuanced answer is we have brakes on cars so that we can go at speed safely. So you couldn't go, 60 kilometers an hour, sorry, miles an hour, kilometers an hour, wherever you are, if you didn't have brakes. Same thing for AI, right? We should be able to go at speed with AI if we have good governance. So here's a good one for you, Stephen. Lack of clear strategy on how to implement AI, driving business cases, AI training, change management. Wow. You owe that guy $5. Lack of adoption by the business team. Yes. Trust. Yeah, what sure the models are really doing. Hallucinations, of course.
And
All right,
Brian,
good
we can
answer.
dive into some of these topics too, right? I mean, I think lack of adoption by business team is an interesting one as well, and have some
Yeah,
thoughts on that. If you want, when
yeah,
we get to that point, we can start diving into some of these and answer what we thought
yeah.
about each one of these if we want to.
Okay, so let's take keep throwing your answers in there if you like. Thank you very much for doing that. So, Stephen, what happened in 2025? I mean, we 2025 was supposed to be the year where we moved from, the sandbox for AI into, actually delivering value. Didn't quite work out. I mean, I know there are some point in time cases where that has happened, but certainly we're not seeing widespread adoption. I was at the Gartner conference back in January, and certainly the same theme is coming up. Yep, 2026 is going to be the year of AI adoption. Things are going to really start rolling. So, but give me your perspective, Stephen. Where do you think we are? Where are we heading?
Yeah, so I think the clarity of adoption of test versus production is one that needs to be fully defined, right? And so in 2025, there was a lot of testing going on, and supposedly, like you said, Brian, 2026 will be the year of operationalizing AI and actually getting value out of it. Unfortunately, quite honestly, we're already in Q2 here, and I'm seeing a lot of customers and prospects and so forth talking about the same thing, right? We want to get things into production. We want to operationalize things in 2026, but it's already Q2. So if you haven't started already, it's going to be somewhat challenging to have that recognized. And I think there's a couple points here. One is I think 2025 we were still learning about the different types of AI. So when you talk about generative AI versus agents versus agentic AI, and how do you define those different things? And I want to be clear, right? We did a question on machine learning. There's tons of machine learning in production across multiple enterprises and corporate enterprises. So that's not what we're talking about here. I think what we're really talking about is generative agent and agentic AI. And so let's break down those three really quick for 2026. I think the adoption of generative AI obviously is clear. People are using multiple tools to do all kinds of things for efficiency, recording meetings, understanding what the outcomes of those meetings are, and stuff like that, right? That the adoption is pretty high, I see, across different industries on that. But when we start talking about agents, truly understanding what a problem to solve can be through an agent and doing that safely and responsibly. I'll apologize in advance. I'll probably say that a lot, safely and responsibly today. It is really the challenge, because I think the comfortability and the trust in what an agent can do, whether it's fully autonomous, meaning we're just going to allow the agent to do whatever it needs to do, or with human in the loop, on the loop, in the loop, etc., is the differentiation. And I think that's what we have to figure out for 2026. That's part one. And then the second part is, once we get comfortability with those agents and the trust and the value of those agents, how do we move to agentic AI, which means how do we get multiple agents to work together to solve an end-to-end problem clearly? And one last thing, and then I'll stop talking. The lack of adoption, I'm going to pick up on that from Victor, lack of adoption by the biz team. I think that's a challenge, right? We still seem to have companies trying to lead with IT because they're the technology arm of getting things like agents and agentic AI. But the more mature companies that are getting things into productions are the ones that are leading by biz. So you have the biz team saying, I have a problem. Here's the problem. I want you to help me solve it with this new technology. And they work hand in hand to go solve it. And then the business will actually adopt it because they've had a say in how to do it, understanding it, trusting it, etc.
Yeah, I mean, one of my sayings that the people at Ortecha are sick and tired of me saying it, but I don't care. Is
We are, by
there
the
are
way,
no
nobody
such things
thinks.
as yeah, there are no such things as AI projects, no such things as IT projects, no such things as operate. They're all business projects, and business projects have one of three outcomes: increase revenue, decrease cost, or mitigate risk. Have an impact can be a fourth, which is your charitable offerings to your clients, and it's important. But if you're not driving it from a business outcome, how are you ever going to stand up in front of a CFO and say we should spend money on this and not this, right? That's where it all comes down to. Uh, so Steve, strategy. Let's jump into strategy. How do we engage in an AI strategy that is led by the business, right? How do we get them engaged so that they are in the lead, because that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, so I think the first step is defining what an AI strategy is. And I think a lot of companies will come out with data strategies, they'll come out with AI strategies, and they're not really clear on what do they actually, so what do we mean by an AI strategy, right? So that's step one, is defining that. I think the second point is why do you want an AI strategy? So exactly to the point you just made, Brian, is what are your corporate enterprise strategies and outcomes that you're looking to do? Then how is
Mm,
it, and I'm going to include data too. I know this we're talking about AI, but has to come along for the ride. Very important. How is your data and AI strategy aligned to those corporate strategies? Is it going to enable them or is it going to drive them? And I think
mm,
that's a good place to start. So once you can map out, like, hey, we need an AI strategy because AI will help us with this corporate strategy and it's going to help enable it, enrich it, make it more efficient, whatever. And you can connect those dots. Now you can go to the executive team and say, here's why we need AI, and here's how it's going to help meet your goals, right? Or the company goals. And then there's the second piece of, well, we may actually have AI as part of the corporate strategy, right? Because there's this new things that we can do from a competitive analysis perspective or a competitive perspective in general. And therefore, we need to adopt this AI strategy because it's a new piece of our corporate strategy, right? So
mhm,
enable or drive. There's two different things there. So that's a good start. I think the second piece is you have to get the right influencers into the room. Now, I didn't say leaders, I said influencers for a very
mhm.
specific reason. You may have a chief data officer, as an example, that is very good on data management, but doesn't quite understand all the AI implications yet. But they may have somebody that works in their organization that is well respected. It could be an architect, for
Yep.
instance, an enterprise architect that everybody listens to because the enterprise architect has shown how to get things into production and they can influence others. So you got to find those key influencers to align on those corporate on those strategies, the AI strategies that align to the corporate strategies, and then have communication. So somebody mentioned change management in our chat, right? Change management is critical. What is the communication plan? What leaders and influencers, I'll combine those both, are already on board for AI, and you don't actually have to go spend time convincing them. Whereas there's detractors in the organization, and how do you identify and map those communication plans to get those detractors on board? So I think that's a good place to start. Defining AI, aligning your AI strategy to either influence or drive your corporate strategies, identify the influences, understand what the value is, and help go out and get those detractors on board is a good place to start.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's way, way back when I worked at IBM back in the last millennium. We had this program called Find the Fox. And it wasn't the person with the power. It wasn't the person with the title. It was the person who was, back then we called it power. Now we would call it influence. And that's the person, that you're all in a meeting, and when that person speaks, everybody shuts up and they turn and they listen because that person is highly respected and usually correct in what they know. And they haven't said a thing all meeting, right? They're sitting there taking everything in. And then so one of the challenges that I find clients face is, it's this challenge, right? Back in the days, oh, my grandkids,
Good
back
picture,
in
by the
the,
way.
yeah, thank you. I'm not in it. That's why it's a good picture. Uh, Back in the day, executives would just be like, "Oh, can't we just have an app for that? Like, we want to increase revenue. Isn't there an app for that?" Like, I mean, I'm being a bit facetious, but oh, look, who was that? Jan Brown was there during the Find the Fox training. Hey, shout out to Jan. That's great.
Jan's an old partner of mine. It's good to see you,
Oh,
Jan.
okay. So so I had coffee with a CIO a year and a half ago. And he was telling me, he says, "Yeah, we've launched an AI project." I'm going, and he rolled his eyes. And I went, "Okay, what's with the eye roll?" And he says, "We're translating our English contracts into French." And I said, "Okay, I don't get the AI." And he says, "Neither do I." He says, "But we've labeled it an AI project because it was being done by some AI agent that somebody was offering, and everybody's on board. Everybody's jumping on board." So there's this expectation out there by executives that AI can solve everything, and why can't you get to it? Like, why aren't we just flipping the switch and it's done? And then there's also the flip side where, all the people that really know what's going on are going, "Oh my goodness, like, we got to put up guardrails." Like, what's the balance there? How do we kind of, manage the expectations and also move things forward? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Steve points out in the chat around maturity level, right? And I think there has to be open and clear conversation on the maturity level of the company in the AI space.
Yeah.
Companies will typically evaluate themselves as more mature than maybe a third party that comes in and understands and assesses where they actually are. I will see different functions and executives rate the enterprise much differently depending upon the function and the
Yep.
view. So I
Yep.
think you start with that, right? You have an open and honest conversation internally, and sometimes you call in a third party to help assess that and understanding where your maturity level is. Once you can get alignment on the maturity level, then you can actually start executing a plan to understand like how fast do we need to go, right? Because sometimes there's need and there's this whole conversation around risk tolerance level. So if you're in an industry where AI is kind of quote unquote taking over jobs and all the stuff that you see that's being published nowadays, you may have to move really quick. So your risk tolerance level may be very high because if you don't move quickly, you could be out of business in 3 to 6 months. You also have to look at the level of maturity. So if you have a high maturity level, you may want to move quicker. So I think it's a combination of risk tolerance level, why are you doing AI, and the impact of that. The second is understanding the maturity level of the company itself. And then the third is what is the appetite internally? Like what is the AI literacy? So that's a little different than maturity, right? Literacy to me is do you understand the impact and how AI can actually enrich your environment and your business? Whereas I think maturity level is what are you actually doing? So with the poll, for instance, I saw some companies will have AI agents in production, but actually it was machine learning had less at one time, which I think is really odd because agents are more mature impact, if you will, and more autonomous can be more autonomous. You have to be more mature and ready to adopt an agent versus machine learning, right? Where you know what the output's going to be. So I think those types of conversations have to happen.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is very valuable, if you have an AI assessment, you know, uh, the assessment and the number or whatever it is that pops out the other side, that's always interesting. That's not the point to me. That you may use that to track your AI adoption, but the value to me is getting the so I think first of all, I think when you do these kinds of surveys, you need a set of questions for the practitioners, and that
Mhm.
could be a different set of questions because it's maybe going to get into more technical detail, and you need a set of questions that are more business oriented, right? And you give those to the two different audiences. So the business side and the more, AI practitioner side. The value is not in the number. The value is in the discussion that happens after you put the number out, right? It's like, oh, you rated that a 3, you rated that a 5, whatever your scale is, right? Tell me why, right? So you get past the, well, AI can do everything comments, right? Because it starts to get people informed and on the same page. So for the practitioners, it helps them align with what the business is really trying to do. And for the business side, it gets them informed on what the risks are so that they can properly prepare their team to manage that. Because we are all responsible for our own AI fluency, and we're all responsible for the data. I mean, if we want to flip to data, I wasn't going to do that this early, but if we want to flip to data, we're all responsible for the data that goes into the AI engine, right? So yeah, really, really, really interesting.
But
So
it's never too early, by the way, Brian, to talk about data when we're talking about AI.
no,
And so,
yeah,
again, looking at the chat, some of the things that people were talking about is data completeness and quality, trust, not sure what the models are doing, manage poor data and lack of understanding of the I mean, this is all data management stuff. What really I'm going to even say the word frustrates me is we've been talking about data governance for decades now. If we
exactly.
did what we were supposed to
Not a new
do
problem.
decades ago,
Yeah.
we could be focusing on the outcomes of AI. Instead, we're still talking about good, solid data management. And to me, data management has changed drastically over the last couple of years, not because of the core foundational elements of it, right? You want the proper data used for the proper use case. You want to have trust in the data. You want to have ownership of data. You want to have all that good data management stuff. But it's how you actually execute that. And what's fascinating is I see a lot of companies, we talk about automated data management at Ortecha, right? Using AI with human in the loop to help automate some of the data management practices and get data ready for AI so that you can reduce your hallucinations, so that you can actually have ownership and accountability that's clear and trusted across the different data domains, if you will. And I think some of the technology that is out and about around automated data management, things like building knowledge graphs, again, another concept that's been around for a very long time, but it's now gaining traction because a knowledge graph can actually give you visualization and understanding of how data relates to each other and actually help you reduce hallucinations actually inside your AI model. And there's lots of conversations. I was on a call just before this meeting, actually, talking about data products, another concept, right? Data marketplaces, data products. All these data management concepts are now coming into the front line because of AI is forcing the topics now. And so while AI can be really cutting edge and modern and things that people want to pay attention to, a lot of the back end stuff that needs to be done is just traditional data management, but now you can use AI to accelerate the value of that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the themes at Gartner this year was um, we're at a tipping point. We're going to hit the knee of the curve, or in Canada, we say the hockey stick effect, where we are generating so much data because of the demand of AI that we will not be able to manage our data manually. So, as Stephen
Can't.
was saying, the irony is we need to use AI to help us manage the data to prepare for AI. Like we don't have a choice. I mean, it's not going to be 10 years. It's going to be, 2, 3 years before we hit the knee of that curve. And we really need to start getting on top of that. And you're right. These problems
Brian,
are
I
not
think
new.
that's today. I think it's today. So you can't manage an environment today with the advent of where your data is sitting inside of an Amazon S3 bucket or Azure Cloud or Google
Yep.
GCP, whatever. And then that gets moved into a Snowflake and that gets moved into a
Yeah.
Databricks.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people like what system is operational systems, what system is actually analytic and AI systems, are they both? And understanding the data movements between it's a total impossibility to do it manually because by the time you document this stuff,
They,
by the way, for regulatory purposes, but also for your outcomes of your models, you're going to actually have a new technology that comes into play, and your models are actually probably not going to be any good anymore, right? I mean, it's
yeah.
literally moving that fast. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we look back at all the major challenges that we've had, crises that we've had, Sarbanes-Oxley, you go back to 2004 kind of era, right? Where, the Enron scandal, where banks, the Enron was counting, loans as income, the financial crisis, of '07, '08. These are all data problems, right? We've had these problems lingering around forever. One of the things that I've been doing most of my career is implementing large, complex challenges like Sarbanes-Oxley, like the regulatory BCPS 239 that came out around the financial crisis. And 90, we just did fraud at one of the banks here in Canada. 80 to 90%, I mean, 90 is maybe a little high, but so let's say 50 to 80% of all implementation challenges are all around the data. I can't tell you how many times we've had, people say, yes, yes, that's the right data element to put in production for this field, and then stands up in production, and the thing totally falls down because it's not the right. We came across when we were doing BCPS 239. For those of you who don't know, that's the regulation that came in place for the banks when the financial crisis came around. So it was basically a data lineage problem, and we had to identify critical data elements. Didn't know how to do that back then. We were making it up as we went along. We came across this thing called the Madoff indicator. Sounds important. So we go in. It's sometimes it's 0, sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's blank. So we dig in, and then we find out, oh, it's really a copy of the West Coast indicator. Oh, okay. What's the West Coast indicator? We don't know. Okay. Is there an East Coast indicator? No. Okay. We took weeks to figure out. I mean, it sounds important, so you better figure this out. We took weeks. We ended up in an EVP's office who said, "Oh yeah, I was the analyst when the Bernie Madoff thing broke. So they asked us if we had a Madoff indicator, and that's our Madoff indicator. You can ignore that." And it's the story. The moral to the story is this knowledge is not in the systems. It's not documented. Some of it's in people's heads, right? And those people have often left the company, or maybe they're at an EVP or presidential level now. So we've got to get the data in order, and that's, I think, one of the key things. So, Stephen, what do people do? Like, what's the first step to kind of get going here? What would you say?
Yeah, so step one and we already talked about this a little bit, is why do you need AI? It's not, I can't tell you how many conversations I've been in because the CEO said to. Well, what does that mean? So start with the conversation about, okay, first of all, what type of AI? Why are you doing it? What's the business outcome that you're looking to do? Then what's the right type of AI? We tend to clump AI into this big pool of things, but there's very different types of AI. There's been stuff that we've been doing since 1960s that's AI. We've been doing machine learning for many years, right? And now you've got these new generative agentic and agent AI. So understanding what the right fit of type of AI for the business outcome that you're looking for. Again, alignment to the corporate strategy, extremely important. Without that, you're not going to get budget, right? So, my past life as a practitioner, I had quarterly conversations on the budgets where we needed investment in data management and AI implementation. And I would literally be asked by the CFO, what is the trade-off? If I'm going to spend X number of dollars on this stuff, that means I can't spend X number of dollars in product development. So tell me why you should get the money and not product,
Right.
right? That's going to market. And if the answer is something like, well, we now take 18 months to go to market on a specific product, and I can reduce that to 9 months, and therefore you have 9 additional months of revenue accelerated. Well, now it's an interesting conversation because now you're talking about 100x return on investment, right? So that's where to get started. And then I mentioned the CFO. A lot of people make the mistake of trying to come up with ROI and return on investment and things like that on these things. And they're like, well, we can do 100x efficiency on this, and we can get rid of 15 headcounts. That's not the conversation you want to have. I think go to your CFO or your VP of finance or whatever you have, sit down with them, tell them about the use case, tell them about the investment that's needed to go execute that use case, show them what you think the outcome's going to be, and have them help you build the model. And that way, when you're sitting a quarter or two from now and you're reporting out in an executive meeting or to your board that we invested X number of dollars in AI, but we got return on investment, you've got the CFO shaking their head along with you, right? Because the first thing they're going to do is look at the CFO and say, are these numbers right? So involve the right people, again, influencers or leaders from the start. Make sure the definition is clear on the outcome, align it to your corporate strategy, understand what the ROI is, get buy-in from your finance team, and then comes all the other stuff, the technology, the processes, the resources, etc.
Yeah. No, I mean, you highlight a really good point in that, if you're going to be the AI leader, or you're going to even just coach the AI leader, part of our job is sales, right? And part of sales is understanding who are the stakeholders, what are their issues, what are the challenges, what is the impact of those issues and challenges? Well, it's taking us 18 months to get a data product or get a product to market, those kinds of things. And then what is the implication if we use this new AI thing to solve that problem? What is the outcome that's going to be? And yeah, getting the right people in the boat with you so that when you do go for final approval, everybody's sitting around the table nodding their heads. That's so important. So who is the right person for this, Stephen? Like, who's the AI champion, if you will, right? I mean, I gotta
That's
think
a
you're gonna say
super
something like it depends.
Yeah, that's a super interesting question because I think it changes by the day. And by the way, if the audience has any questions, now would be a good time since we have about
Oh
15 minutes
yeah,
left,
please.
less. All right, so look, uh, again, when I look at it, at specific industries, I think it does depend. I know that's the terrible answer, but what's super interesting to me is I'm seeing a change in the marketplace around chief human resource officers getting involved in AI because of the fact that, like, when you talk about change management, when you talk about people's jobs descriptions changing, so like I like to have the conversation where let's not talk about cost efficiency of cutting heads, right? Because I'm really tired of that, quite honestly. Every organization, every person in an organization typically has, the next 18 months of work that they need to do in the next 30 days, right? So there's plenty of work to go around. How do we take AI and implement it and change people's job descriptions to make them more efficient to focus on the core strategic things? To focus on less interesting things, interesting things. So HR is starting to change job descriptions. There's training programs. So we talked about AI literacy and data literacy and so forth earlier. So what are the training programs? What is the education around that? That's typically like an HR thing. There is reorganizations that are happening, right? You bring in a head of AI, or you bring in a CDO, or whatever the term, CDAO. There's all these acronyms, right? You bring that into an organization because you want somebody to head up AI. Well, how does that affect your technology implementation? Does that mean the technology still lives in technology, or does that, like, the customer data management environment, get moved over to the head of AI? That's a change management. That's a process change that usually HR needs to get involved in. So the bottom line is, I think HR is getting more involved in this AI thing. I'm not saying they're the ones that are going to be approving models, right? But they will be involved, and if they're not, get them involved. That's one. I think the second thing I see is sometimes legal or privacy and highly regulated may actually step in and have kind of the overall accountability of AI because of the regulatory issues and the fines and the publicity and the hit on your brand and all that lovely stuff. They're the ones that understand and control the risk mitigation. And then the third one I would say that's a little bit different is the CFO, because of the return on investment. Like, think about and the numbers go up every day, right? It's going to be into the trillions of dollars of investment. If we don't understand the ROI that's measurable, that's going to start hitting our P&Ls, um, something's going to happen. Either investment's going to slow or stop, God forbid. Because if you stop, I think if you stop AI investment, you're going to fall behind your competitors, quite frankly. Um, and really have some measurement. So CFO, chief HR officer, and I think the chief legal officer or compliance officer or whatever they're called. Those are the three different ones. So I didn't answer your question directly, but I wanted to give you a different perspective on what I'm seeing in the marketplace.
Yeah, and Mark McQueen, one of our other partners here, has got a series out right now around a conversation between a CDO, call it what you will, CDAO, CDO, CDAIO, and finance is one conversation he's having. HR is another conversation. CTO, CIO, another conversation. And I think the answer is, as Steven says, there's going to be areas where, they're going to probably get pulled in because it impacts them regardless of what the particular AI implementation is going to be. But if you're a head of marketing's the number one user of analytics in the organization usually, right? Like, you should be leading some kind of AI initiative, or you should have it on your radar. If you're in finance, you should have it on you should be engaging as business owners. You should be engaging whoever the right people are in your company and saying, okay, I keep hearing about this AI thing. What is it? What do I do? How do I solve the problems that I have today with this AI thing? Right. That's I think, and I like the word fluency too. AI fluency.
Hmm.
I find it has a nicer ring to it. Like, nobody particularly wants to be AI literate. I don't want to be French literate. I want to be French fluent. I don't want to be fluent
Well,
in French, right?
so
So,
that's an interesting point. And I will say that there are subject matter experts on data literacy and data fluency. And I've had
yes,
multiple conversations with these people, and they really do mean two different things. So it depends upon what you're trying to accomplish. I think right now, because of the maturity in the space, it is literacy. It's just trying to understand it, right, and be
right.
literate on it, which
Yes,
is less mature than being fluent in it, right? So I
yeah.
think absolutely, Brian. I love the point. I think fluency is where we want to get to. Um, but unless you're more mature, I think let's settle for literacy right now.
Yeah. Okay, we've got 5 minutes left. No questions in the chat so far, so please fire your questions in as anytime. And we'll continue the conversation and watch for questions as they pop up, as will our friend Louise, who's in there.
So,
So,
Brian, if you
Stephen,
don't
what?
mind, there is one thing we haven't really tackled from the comments, right? So, I think we tackled a lot of them around things like data completeness and trust and lack of adoption. I think we did. If we didn't, please call us out on that. But there is one around how sophisticated a level of maturity a company needs to reach to be able to take
Good
advantage of
point.
agentic AI, right? To monitor,
Good point.
control, manage AI landscape with all of its risk. And I think that depends upon the industry you're in as well, right? So if you're highly regulated versus not being highly regulated, you can be a little less mature in the retail space than you can be in banking or healthcare. I will say I was at a healthcare event last week in Boston, and it was super interesting because I always thought like healthcare sometimes they're a little bit slower because of that regulation piece, but not this group. It was about 100 or so people in the room. There were a combination of healthcare practitioners and doctors, as well as people that were doing AI for specific biotech companies, et cetera. And what came through clearly to me is if you have the right guardrails and the right conversation, even if your AI maturity is a little bit lower, right? So you may say, well, wait, if we have guardrails, then we're super mature. Well, that's not true. You might be highly mature in the guardrails because you're highly regulated and you have a really good compliance person that has ensured that the guardrails are there. But you may be low maturity in the execution, meaning the people that are actually using the AI. So those are two different things. So I think that's where you have to understand, again, what the business use case is, the individuals that are executing that use case. What is the environment? Is it internal versus external? The implications is exponential on agentic AI to a customer, where maybe you're setting pricing automatically, fully autonomous on the marketplace of things that you're selling. That's a much different implications than if you're doing something internally with a human in the loop to approve it before it actually goes to market. So I think there's no answer. It's literally what is the formula that of the guardrails of the individual of the maturity level that is using the AI, the risk tolerance level, the amount of regulation, and then is it internal versus external? You got to combine all those to come up with an answer of is agentic AI right for this use case or not? It's not one simple thing. So yes, I am creating a scientific algorithm across all those different perspectives in order to determine that.
Yeah. And I think I came to the conference I was at just last week was really, really pleased to see a very broad spectrum of industries at the conference. I said as I was moderating the opening panel, I said, I'm so pleased because 3 years ago this would have been a banking conference, maybe four, right? Because nobody was really interested in AI governance back then, except banks, right? So it was really good to see. Now, a couple of shocks for me. Um, One of the largest construction companies in Canada, it's a global company, does massive, massive projects, whole waterfronts kind of thing, waterfront redevelopment. They have a full ontology for their business. So their business is fully mapped inside an ontology. I was just like, wow, that I need to dive into that. And so I've set up a couple of meetings. And then I contrast that to a conversation we had with one of our UK partners who was saying, yeah, I know this guy at this construction company. He really wants to understand this AI thing. They're nowhere on it. They don't really understand it. And I'm going, you think about construction. I mean, why do we have great project management across the globe? It's because of the construction industry. So they've been world leaders in project and program management. Um, don't let your industry fool you into thinking that AI is not going to impact you. At least, that it's not accelerating. Here you have a fairly, what you would think of as not very progressive industry, construction. And here's a company that's leading that by and able to take on global projects because of their forward thinking on that, right? So
It's hitting every industry, Brian. I mean,
it,
it's hitting consulting, it's hitting the legal industry, it's hitting waste management industry, it's whatever industry you can think of. Because think about it, there's different levels of AI too, right? So simple things of transcribing a meeting and becoming efficient on what the follow-ups are and who has the responsibility for follow-ups might have taken somebody 20 or 30 minutes after a meeting before. Now it can be done in 3 minutes, right? So it can be as simple as that, or it can be as complex as a full end-to-end agentic purchase order process through procurement that kind of streamlines that. That's one of frustrations, right? Like, how long does it take to get a PO through procurement? Like, well, you can have agents doing different components of that, still have a human in the loop, and really, instead of 3 months of onboarding a new vendor, you might be able to onboard them in 1 week, right? Or onboarding a new employee. Huge impact to onboarding new employees with AI if you do it the right way. So I think it can hit any industry, any type of execution, unless it's like plumbing or electricity or something like that. And the robots are coming soon, so maybe we'll hit that.
Well, my construction example though, right? I mean, yeah, you may not be hands-on, but at least when you show up at the work site, you've got the right people in the place, you've got the right materials in the
Yep.
place. The guy who was supposed to do the work before you did the work actually was there and did the work, like all of that, it's AI agents working on that kind of stuff. So we're at time. Thank you very much. Really appreciate folks. We will be sending out a recording, as I said, hopefully today, although Louise is in the UK, so we'll see how much time she has left before the end of the day if she can get this out. And you will get an email. If you have any questions or comments, want to reach out to either Stephen or I, just there'll be information in that email that gets sent to you. Thank you very much, and hope everybody has a great day. And we'll talk again soon in 2 weeks when we will be talking with Charles Ivy. Charles is our partner in charge of data engineering. So he's the guy that's building some of these cool agentic products that we'll be looking into. And you can sign up for that on our website or through the email that Louise will send out. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian.